Well, before we get to Alabama, where you're at now, I believe I read that you went to high school in Eugene, Oregon. My twin brother used to work for the Ducks football program, and so when I was out there before the pandemic, I was able to go to watch Garth Brooks perform at Austin Stadium. Never got to see a football game there, but I know that place gets rocking. But it'd be hard to beat the noise of a Garth Brooks concert. I got to interview Rob Mullins as well. But I'm just kind of curious, what was it like? Obviously, things have changed a lot since you were in high school there. Oregon's grown athletically a lot, but what was it like growing up in a college town for high school like Eugene, Oregon?
Well, it was great. My dad was the athletic director there at Oregon in the 80s. They didn't have really two nickels to rub together. Phil Knight was building his little sneaker company up in Portland at the time that turned into Nike. And but Eugene was a wonderful place. We still have friends back there today, and it's been very very interesting and to watch that university and that athletic department continue to evolve. When my dad was there in I think it was 89, he has the athletic director. They bought their way into the Independence Bowl in Shreveport, and it was the first bowl game that the Ducks had been to since the Rose Bowl in the 60s. And so it was, it was really interesting to see that be a big step that took place at Oregon in the late 80s and to where they are today. They've been on the national stage and had a lot of success. So, but Eugene was a great town to grow up in. I was able to ride my bike over to Austin Stadium, and we didn't live terribly far away from there. And having just being in a college town is a great environment to grow up in, especially if you're into college sports. And so I was very fortunate to be exposed to that at an early age and kind of learned how all of it works. It still impacts decisions that I make today and the experiences that I get to be a part of today.
I'm always curious with the changes to Hayward Field. Have you had a chance to be back there since it changed with been modernized? And I was there whenever they first started the construction, so I was still able to see its original view right in the middle of campus, historic Hayward Field. Have you been there since?
I've not been. I think I was outside of it when they had started construction. I'm actually going to go back to the NCAA track and field championships next month, and our track and field teams have a chance to hopefully make some noise on the national stage this year. So I'll be back there and look forward to seeing it. I'm, one of my really almost lifelong friends is Casey Martin, who played golf at Oregon, or played golf at Stanford, and then is now the men's golf coach at Oregon. And Casey has told me about it, and I actually got to talk to Phil Knight about it a couple times too. So it's been very very interesting to see the evolution of that, because Hayward is one of the grand historic places in track and field, literally in the world. And so, to see such a modern facility on the same footprint where Hayward was, I'm certainly eager to see it. I've been told it's just out of this world as far as the quality of it. So I'll look forward to seeing it when I go out there next month.
Well, the last Eugene question before we move on is, I was told while I was out there that The Simpsons was based on the town neighboring Eugene, like 2 miles away. Any insights to that, whether that's truth or fiction?
Yeah, I don't know if that's accurate or not. I've watched The Simpsons a few times. I probably, you may question my maturity when I make this statement. I've watched Family Guy over the years more than I've watched The Simpsons, and so I'm not very, very good with my Simpsons trivia.
Well, we mentioned your athletic director, kind of upbringing was your dad, and he was an athletic director at some of these well-known brands. But before we get to that, you also got an A in a report card or career report. I believe I saw in a video interview. Do you remember any key points from that report, and what's it like? Just kind of it came full circle.
Yeah, it's over there on that wall, on the I guess on my left-hand side. It's the framed third or fourth grade career report. I always tell recruits when they're in here, That's the only A I ever got in my life. But in all sincerity, it was yeah. When my dad retired from A&M, my parents built a home in College Station where they still live today, and so my mom found that when they were cleaning out a bunch of old file cabinets, and so she got it framed for me. And I think I talked about how you got to go to games and you got to be around athletes, and back then, because this was the late 70s, early, maybe 1980 or so, you got to talk on the phone a lot and write letters. And so obviously that's different today with you still talk on the phone at times, but it's one of about 19 ways we can communicate. But it was just, I mean, it showed the interest that I had at an early age of what intercollegiate athletics was. And, and as a person that's been around it literally my whole life, with everything that's going on in today's world of college athletics, it's a reminder that there were different times. There were different times that were really good. And at the same time, too, we have opportunities to continue to evolve in what we do. And, really, we're going to have an all staff meeting tomorrow. And, one of the things I'm going to tell our staff is that we have to adapt, and you adapt or die. And right now in our world, there's a lot of changes that are taking place. Some of them I think are positive. I also will tell you that I'm very concerned about making sure that we continue to have broad-based programs in intercollegiate athletics. It's a pretty challenging time for us right now in a lot of those ways. But I really do hope that we can find a landing spot that's good for intercollegiate athletics as a whole, is good for the young men and young women in our programs, and good for our universities and communities. And, towns like Eugene, Oregon, and Tuscaloosa, Alabama, benefit from strong intercollegiate athletic programs. And I think there's value in so many ways, maybe that we don't get enough credit for as an enterprise. But I do believe that we can find a model that is going to allow us to continue to move forward in college sports.
Yeah, speaking of just those two college towns, your dad being at Oregon, Nebraska, Texas A&M, these are well-established college brands for college athletics, and so looking back to being raised up at those three institutions as part of your family, what kind of advice do you pull from that perspective, and just the older part of college athletics that whether it's tradition or history, that with all these changes you still pull from and hope you see whenever all these changes continue to unfold?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, college sports, especially college sports, is one of the few things left in our society that brings people together from all sorts of different backgrounds, and we allow our differences to be checked at the door. You see the picture behind me. It's my built by Bama picture that has represents all 21 of our teams. There's great diversity. There's different views religious wise. There's, from a religion standpoint, there's different views politically. There's different young men and young women from different socioeconomic backgrounds, race, just different things that at times, unfortunately, divides us. And they all come together for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And the same thing with our fan base. And that's from one end of the country to the Washington Huskies to the Maine Black Bears, and, in the South and the Midwest. And my dad was part of that and my mom too, at Oregon and Nebraska and A&M. So they got a little bit of almost everywhere in the country except for the Northeast. And I tell our coaches and staff this, it's almost sacred. And I want to make sure we do everything we can as an enterprise to allow that to continue to happen. Now, it may look different, and it's probably going to look different. We're anxiously waiting to see what the NCAA not Constitution Committee. I'm drawing a blank.
Transformation Committee.
Thank you. My mind locked up for a second there. What the Transformation Committee will come out with, and we've already seen a few things. I think entered into the narrative that it's going to look a lot different, and I think more of the responsibility is going to fall on the conference commissioners and the presidents and the athletic directors and senior women's administrators and faculty reps to find a way to put a model together that is sustainable for the long-term health of what we do. I had an executive staff meeting this morning, and about 75% of what we talked about today were budget increases on just because of inflation that's going on right now. And I think sometimes the narrative out there is, oh, they've got all the money that they need. I actually remember this when I was a student at Oregon. I was in an astronomy class, and we went out in these fields that are now that are close to Autzen Stadium. And Dr. Zimmerman was the professor's name, and he was a great professor. I learned a lot in that class, and we were out looking at the stars. And my dad, as the AD, they had just started building what is now the Casanova Center. And Dr. Zimmerman said, man, they have so much money over in athletics, they don't know what to do with it all. That couldn't have been further from the truth. They didn't, I mean, they were by hook or crook, they were putting that facility together. And 5 years after it opened, Oregon played in its first Rose Bowl since the 60s, right? I think it was the 94 season, 95 Rose Bowl. And so there's this narrative at all times that we have more money than we know what to do with. It's just, I mean, there is revenue generated, and we've been fortunate to have increases in that, but it's also very, very expensive in our model because football makes a healthy profit. Men's basketball barely turns a profit. And then you have 19 sports that lose a lot of money. I was with a really good donor this weekend, and he was surprised to learn that our softball program is one of the best in the country. We lose well into seven figures every single year on putting on a championship level softball program. And those are real dollars that I really hope that we, back to your question, we can still find a way to have those broad-based experiences for everybody involved because of how it brings people together, how it opens young people's minds. It gives them great opportunities to continue to develop who they are athletically, or academically, socially. And they learn how to be around different people from all different backgrounds. And they learn about teamwork and hard work and the benefits of what happens when those things are rewarded. And so I really do hope that's something we can continue to have long term. So that's a part of it. The other thing, there is I'm glad we're doing a lot of the things that we are in name, image, and likeness. I'm not sure if the collectives were the original intent of this. We've had young men and young women. There's a picture right behind me of Montana Fouts, who's on our softball team. She has benefited from a name, image, and likeness that she wouldn't have been able to before. Bryce Young, our quarterback this year, has been able to as well, that are good, NIL opportunities that are market driven, that are very healthy. Some of this that we're seeing out there probably isn't quite market driven. It's recruiting driven, and recruiting changes the narrative of that. And those dollars have to come from somewhere in order to give a chance to have those dollars be in the marketplace.
There's been a lot of, two things. The first is being in this industry so long, and what you just talked about for the past 5 minutes, you caring about broad-based program outside of what Alabama is known nationally for, football. Do you ever get sick of or just kind of calloused over of all the people that don't believe people like you that might say that? Because I've heard people talk about that a lot, and a lot of the pushback is, well, you're only saying that because you have to. I mean, have you just got done responding to those types of accusations, or you just kind of?
Yeah, you just can be as genuine as you possibly can be. And I think if you talk to the young men and the young women in our programs, and they see us out there supporting them whenever my or our executive team schedule allows us to be there, we care about it. I mean, the day I was introduced to our department 5.5 years ago here at Alabama, I was in front of all of our coaches, all of our staff, and I told our coaches, I said, there's a reason why we keep score, and we're Alabama. We want to win, and we're not going to apologize for that. And so I think it's a very easy narrative to just like I talked about with Dr. Zimmerman, who was a very good professor and did a wonderful job educating even somebody with my academic ability, that there are just easy things to believe, and those things can be thrown out, whether they're accurate or not. And so it's something that I'm getting something across my screen here. I'm not sure how that happened. Can you still see me?
Yep.
Okay. Microsoft Teams came up. And so I just think it's like I hear the term unpaid labor, right? You hear that over and over and over again. And then you look at what we do spend on a young man or young woman's experience here at Alabama, not counting a dollar in salaries. All right. If you're on a full ride and you're on Pell, now with Alston, other things, you're getting about $38,000 a year cash in pocket, tax free. Right. So that's about a 52 to 55, depending where you live, $52 to $55,000 a year of income. That doesn't even count your scholarship, your board, your books, everything else that the rest of the student body is paying for. That gets well into six figures very quickly. And then if you also start accounting for what we spend in mental health, what we spend in academic support, and not counting a dollar in salaries, it goes well above $200,000 annually. Those are real dollars. Okay. I think what has happened is you'll see some people who have, and I'm not questioning their motive necessarily, but what I am saying is they have a different desire maybe than what the coaches, our staff, and a lot of our student athletes really genuinely have in trying to create the model that we have. It is a flawed model. If you're a business person, you wouldn't start college athletics where you have 21 sports at Alabama like we have, and that 19 of them lose into seven figures each year, and how you run it. And so I think we're going to have to look and say, how do we sustain that for the long haul? And whether people, I think Travis, it's a fair question. People can say, "Oh, I don't believe you with it." I can't control that. All I can do is try to have my actions speak that we genuinely care about the young men and the young women in our program, and we want them to have a great experience, and we want our fans to have a great experience, and we want our university to be represented in a good way. There'll be imperfections because mankind is involved. We'll have young men and young women make mistakes. We'll have coaches and staff make mistakes. And once you know what you know about it, you do your very best to address it, and try to have a program that's one that people want to be associated with.
The other question coming out of that follow-up was, there's been a lot of talk about pushing more regulation and governance to the conference offices. Is that something you just see as an almost certainty that conference offices, which are scattered, when you look at all over the country, they are regionalized for the most part. And whether you're, Power 5, autonomy, or other Division I conferences, is that almost a certainty that you think that conferences are going to be take over more of the responsibility there in setting rules?
Sure headed that way, isn't it? I mean, it looks like it, and I get it. The SEC probably has differences compared to the old WAC, right? And that's just reality. So it's probably healthier for the enterprise of college sports if there can be some autonomy in those, the Power 5 conferences being managed differently than maybe a conference that's not a Power 5 conference. Not trying to single anybody out and show any lack of respect, but I do think that that's something that I think could help create a healthier model going forward for college sports.
Yeah, I just wonder if one day we're going to see all the people at the NCAA here in Indianapolis area just start scattering to kind of placement to all these conference offices for governance. It'd be an interesting thing to see. Yeah,
and Travis, a lot of the people in Indy at the headquarters, and I do too. I'm on the men's basketball selection committee, and I've got a meeting up there later this week. Those are good people, work their tail off, that care about college sports and are trying to work within the model that's currently there. And so everybody that bashes the NCAA, and the NCAA has deserved to be criticized. There's no doubt about it. At the same time, too, they're also following the mission that's been created by the leadership of the NCAA, by somewhat by the conferences, somewhat by the presidents, chancellors, athletic directors, faculty reps, and senior women's administrators. And also from the voice of college athletes. I think, Travis, one of the things that maybe isn't represented as correctly as we should in today's world, what gets the attention, right? The squeaky wheel. All right. And while we have not been as progressive as we should be in intercollegiate athletics, and I agree with that wholeheartedly, I also don't know if the messaging that you hear out there is necessarily what the majority feel. Okay. Now, should you listen to what the young men and young women say? Absolutely, you should. That's important. Okay. At the same time, too, we're all paid to be adults. When I was 18 to 22, I had a decent head on my shoulders, I think. But now that I got a lot more of this gray hair on my head, there's a lot of things I know now that I didn't know when I was 18 years old. And so I think while you're hearing some voices out there that are ones you need to pay attention to, you need to learn from, you need to grow with, there's also some things that I do think a lot of the young men and young women who are in intercollegiate athletics across the country within our programs are very concerned about the long-term health of what we're going to be able to do. Montana Fouts, she talked about this on the radio, our picture I referenced earlier. She did she's in graduate school now, and she's in a sports management class. Her final project was to be athletic director, and for her project, she decided she wanted to rebuild our softball stadium, which we have one of the probably top 2 or 3 softball stadiums in the SEC, certainly one of the top ones in the country. We lead the country in attendance. We're very fortunate, the passion of our fan base. And she started looking at it of what it would cost to add seats and do these amenities in different parts of the park. And her own words were, "My gosh, I had no idea how expensive this was." And the radio guys that were interviewing her said, "Man, somebody out there," not to talk in third person, said, "Greg Byrne is out there somewhere saying, 'I've told you this.'" And I think that goes back to my earlier comment about, there's just plenty of money to add. Let's say if we'd added 1,000 seats in softball, which we probably could fill up a lot of games, you're probably talking $8,000 to $10,000 a seat for an open air seat to have concessions and restrooms and everything else, the amenities that you need to go along with it. Well, that's $10 million, right? You did, let's say it's $10,000 a seat. Those are real dollars. And to Montana's credit, she said, "Man, I had no idea." And so I think take that a step further. Some of what you're seeing out there in college athletics, especially, is that you're seeing these narratives that, hey, this is how everybody feels. There's plenty of money. There's all these different things. And there are places that we have not been as efficient as we should be in college sports. There's no doubt. Okay. At the same time, too, I think what the reality is often very different than what the narrative that takes place out there.
We talked about the transformation committee a bit and conference offices. There's been a lot of talk about this committee and the co-chairs. I've gotten to know Julie Cromer. She's been on the podcast. She used to work at IU. We didn't overlap there, but very familiar with her career, and had several MAC athletic directors on the podcast too. But I haven't heard much about Greg Sankey, SEC commissioner. He's also the co-chair. Just what has and still does make Greg such a great steward of the SEC in all these changes that are unfolding? Because I would assume that there's no one more confident in athletics than athletic directors that have Greg Sankey on their behalf right now.
Yeah, first of all, Julie is really sharp. She was in the SEC before she went to Ohio U at Arkansas, and I've really enjoyed working with Julie over the years. And when I found out that she was one of the co-chairs of the transformation committee with Greg, I thought they had a great choice. And I saw her at the men's Final Four in New Orleans and got to talk to her for a while. And every time you spend a few minutes with her, you walk away impressed. And I certainly did that day again. Greg Sankey is one of the smartest people you'll ever meet in any field. He's well read. He's well thought out. He's got a humility about him that is refreshing. He's got a great sense of humor, very dry sense of humor. He, even though it's been a long while since he's been on a campus, he really works hard to get a feel of what takes place on the campus. He'll call and talk to you and ask you questions about the experience for the student athletes. He'll call and ask you questions about coaches and what they're going through. He'll talk to your coaches. Nick Saban and Greg Sankey talk on a fairly regular basis because they both respect one another and what they do. And so, for me, for the last 5.5 years, to be in the same room as Greg at SEC meetings, to watch how he manages all the different campuses, the different student athletes, what you have on, whether it's the media side, whether it's the NCAA side, he has a great grasp of all those areas. And that's because he's worked extremely hard to understand each of the different constituents that he's working with on a daily basis. And some commissioners don't work to understand it at the level that he does, and in my opinion. And I think that's one of the things is his broad-based understanding of what makes intercollegiate athletics work, and the positives, the challenges, and how you best try to approach that in an environment where it's not a dictatorship, right? When you're the commissioner, you're trying to get 14 here in the SEC, soon to be 16 presidents and chancellors and athletic directors and SWAs and faculty reps, all to try to work collectively together. Ultimately, the buck stops with the presidents and chancellors, but it's it's something that's really important to have a good understanding of it from his experience, and he does. And so I was very, very pleased to see that he was named the co-chair, and he's been updating us and keep getting feedback from us. And that's obviously healthy to have dialogue in your process to make the best decisions that you can under very challenging times.
I feel like he's a book recommendation trendsetter, because I've heard from more than one person that I need to read The Club. So I did read about the Premier League, and very similar seems like situation to the college athletics faces. And then I know Julie was reading that too, because I heard her mention that on a podcast. And so I've heard it's his compliance background and his curiosity that makes him a good book recommendation. So
yeah, he does. I've read The Club as well, and a number of others that we've exchanged books as well. I've got one sitting here on my desk right now that when I head to Indy this week, I'll probably try to take with me and read on the road.
You want to share what the book title is? Maybe maybe I've read it.
Don't Be Afraid to Win.
I haven't read that. Sounds good. I just finished Amazon Unbound, and great, good, bad, and the ugly of Amazon innovation. But so that's great. Good airline reading. You coming here into Indianapolis.
That's right.
Well, so we'll stick with kind of more of a fun person in the SEC, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. I'm admittedly not a historian of the SEC, but a lot of times I find myself turning on the Paul Finebaum show just because I mean, you can tell the passion from him, but also his listeners that call in, and just seems great. I'm kind of curious. You've been on there several times. He's a great interviewer, something I'm always looking to improve on. But what has someone like Paul Finebaum done for the SEC as far as connecting to the fans there in the region?
Yeah, well, Travis, you've done a nice job with your interview, so I wouldn't cut yourself short on that one. So you've done, you should feel good about that. Finebaum, Paul, I've known a long time. He certainly had tapped into the passion of what the SEC is. The tagline for the SEC, it just means more. There's not a better tagline out there for any marketing campaign that I can ever think of. And the SEC is something that is multi-generation, right? Where you could be at an Alabama football game. I'll be at baseball and softball this weekend, and you're going to have grandparents there. You may have great-grandparents there, and then you're going to have the grandparents' children, and then you're going to have their children. And so you'll have a game where it's just where you have our ability to even sell a skybox in today's world. A lot of the country, it's hard to do these days. Out here, because of the multi-generational approach, there are families that want to do that when they have that ability, or they want to buy blocks of 6 or 8 seats so they can all go to the game collectively together, because it's such a part of the fabric of the society here. And that's really where you see it. And so this weekend I was down in Point Clear, Alabama, right next to Fairhope, and everywhere you went, and that's a 4-hour drive from here, but you're still in the state of Alabama, right? And everywhere you went, you saw Alabama hats, you saw Auburn hats, you'd see a couple LSU, a couple Ole Miss, a couple Mississippi State, a couple Georgia ones. And it is just part of what you talk about and what you're a part of on a daily basis. And because it's a place where you grow up around it. And having grown up in Eugene, Oregon, you'd see some of that. You'd see some multi-generation, but in the SEC, you see a ton of it. And it helps I always, I jokingly say to my friends out west when, I say, what's it like to live in Alabama? And I talk about how much I love living in Alabama, and Regina and I both really do. And I said, when you get introduced to somebody here that you haven't met before, they ask you three questions. They'll say, who's your kin? So who's your family, right? Because everybody's from around here. And they're going to say, are you Baptist or Methodist? And then they're going to ask you, are you Auburn or Alabama? And those things define who you are. And it's really fun to be a part of that type of culture where there's such passion for it. And Paul Finebaum has done a wonderful job of tapping into that and connecting that very strong fabric and making them come together even more. And so it's always entertaining. And obviously I keep pretty busy during the day, so I don't hear them a whole lot, but every once in a while I have it on in my office just as, to hear the pulse of what the Finebaum show is saying. And it goes right along with the tagline of "It just means more." And the Finebaum show is a big part of that.
You hired John Cohen as the baseball head coach at Mississippi State, and what was interesting is he went on to become the athletic director in 2016. Having hired him when you were the AD, were you surprised that he became an athletic director? Because growing up, I'm sure you saw that similar to how college presidents, usually they're faculty and then they work their way up to the presidency. I mean, a lot of the athletic directors used to be coaches, I imagine, and so maybe that wasn't that weird. It doesn't happen a lot in the industry anymore. Were you surprised, and what kind of skill set did he have that maybe you weren't surprised that was able to translate into the AD role?
Yeah, so John's really smart. He's actually from Tuscaloosa. His father used to be a law professor here at Alabama, and so John was a guy. I was at Kentucky with him when he became the baseball coach at Kentucky, and then I went to Mississippi State, and he played at Mississippi State and wanted to come back to state to play, and had done a great job at Kentucky, and so we hired him, and so actually early on he told me, he said, Greg, I'm interested maybe someday of being an athletic director, and the model where the old coach becomes the AD. That doesn't happen very often anymore. It still occasionally does, and John's an example of that. Barry Alvarez did a great job at Wisconsin. There's been a few others that have made that transition. But when we hired Dan Mullen as the football coach at Mississippi State, it was myself and Scott Strickland, who's now the AD at Florida, and John Cohen, and we went out, and I took John because I was really young. I was only 36 years old. And I was interviewing coaches that were all older than me for the most part, except for Dan. He was actually younger than me when we hired him. He still is younger than me. But I wanted John to be able to say to the people we were interviewing, "Hey, listen, if Greg and Scott tell you they're going to do something, you can take it to the bank. That they're going to be direct and honest with you." I also thought John was really good at reading people, and he had back then we had Blackberries, right? Blackberries had just come out, and so I always remember John would sit in the room, and we interviewed a few coaches at the Embassy Suites in Buckhead. We interviewed a few of them at I think at the Grand Hyatt at the Dallas Fort Worth Airport. I can't remember where else we went to about 3 different places to interview the coaches we did. And John would sit there during the meeting, and he'd ask a couple questions, but he'd just sit there with his BlackBerry typing away the entire time. And John would always wear sunglasses on his forehead like this. My forehead doesn't stick out enough, I guess, to do it. And he'd have his sunglasses up here. And at that age, we didn't need reading glasses. And he'd be typing away. The coach would walk out of the room. And we interviewed some people that people know today. It was a pretty strong group of candidates. And he would just nail it. Strengths, weaknesses, talk about coaching philosophies, would talk about, how they'd handle academics, recruiting, all these different things. And he gave incredible feedback from a coach's perspective in a short amount of time. And in a way that I think very few people of any background are able to accomplish that way. And I was like, he may be able to do it. So I left to go to Arizona. Scott Strickland became the AD when I left. And then Scott goes to Florida, and John told me, he said, "Hey, man, I want I wanted to get to be the AD at Mississippi State, and when Dr. Keenum hired him as the AD, I thought it was a great hire by Dr. Keenum, and he's when you're an AD, you're never going to bat 1,000, right? But John's done a really good job as the AD there, and he and I talk regularly. In fact, we talked this morning and we share different thoughts and ideas, and he's certainly a person that I think is one of the really good ADs out there in the country.
Yeah, got to get him on Higher Ed Athletics at some point soon. Get him on there. I do wonder if with transfer portal now becoming, a year-round, recruiting is a year-round thing. I'm wondering if we'll start seeing the rise of coaches that maybe have been around, have those same skill sets. Maybe they want to get into administration and not be, recruiting year-round. Maybe make a transition change. Do you think? Is that in the foreseeable future, you think, or is it really just the business model has changed so much that if you haven't been doing it, John might be the exception to the rule, or could you see this cycle happen again?
Yeah, I don't know. I think everybody's scratching their head right now in the head coaching and even in the AD position with transfer portal, with name, image, and likeness, and just saying, hey, where's this thing gonna? How are we going to land here in a spot that can keep college athletics healthy for everybody involved for a long time? And so I'm not sure. I know there's still plenty of programs out there putting out sports management majors, and I know there's plenty of people in our industry who have aspirations, which I had them too, right? And I want to just say, hey, if it, I tell. Here's one of the things I ask Travis when I'll have young people, and sometimes people my age or older, come in and say, hey, I'm thinking about something different, and I really would love to work in college sports, and I want to have your job someday. And I'm like, great, some days you can have it, but I still love what I get to do and get to be a part of. But I'll say to them, listen, isn't necessarily you having to be the AD. There's really important roles in our departments where you're not the actual AD, that whether like you, Travis, you're in compliance, you're in academics, you're in fundraising, you're in marketing. Hey, the people that cut the grass for us, they're important, right? We got to have good fields and safe fields. That's really important what we do. So everybody's got their role and everything's important. But I'll say to them sometimes, if you're bound and determined to be an athletic director, and I'm often a little disappointed that more college students don't know when I ask them this question. I say, how many United States senators are there? And some kind of just stare at you like, oh, I'm not sure. And I'll say, well, there's 2 per state. Then they can usually get it. So there's 100, right? And I'll say to them, being a United States senator is a heck of a lot more important than being an athletic director. You're deciding our country's health plans. You're deciding whether we could go to war, infrastructure for all of what we do in our country. And that's really important stuff. And there's 100 of them. How many Power 5 ADs are there? Will be the next question I ask. And some will say, 60 or 70, whatever the numbers. And I said, well, there's 65 of them. And I said, if that's your dream, go for it. I want to encourage you to work your tail off and do the right things. And you may have that opportunity to do this someday. I said, but also keep in mind that if you are fortunate enough to get to work in college athletics, don't take that for granted and say, hey, this is something that I know if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, there'll be a lot of people that want to have the job that I have. And so don't be beyond that. I hope when I'm done at Alabama, I'm hard to replace because I've done a good job. I also know the University of Alabama will continue when I'm done. And now I want to make it better, and I want to make an impact on the university, on our student athletes, on our fans, and all that. But I also know that this university is really special and a whole nother level. So, anyways, I just I want to say I'm not sure who all watches Higher Ed Athletics, but I just say if you're a part of it, don't lose sight of what you get to be a part of on a daily basis, and don't take that for granted, because I got out of athletics for a year and a half. It was one of the best things I ever did because it helped my patience level. It helped me realize that where my true passion was working in intercollegiate athletics and working with our teams and coaches, our young people. And after I got back in, I had a much better appreciation for that I was fortunate that I was able to get back in. A lot of people that get out don't. And so that's important that we have good, strong people in our industry who care about the enterprise of college sports and the people that are involved with it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for anyone that works in college athletics or that doesn't yet, that might be in school still. Yeah, I wanna end it with talking about one more topic. I try to be tactical on people that are in the chair or almost in the chair, about one issue. And you recently presented to the Board of Trustees about a new basketball and gymnastics arena, I believe. And just kind of curious how long you've all been working on that actual project, from idea to actual, this is ready to go to the board, because I know it takes a lot to present to the board and it better be ready. So what's kind of the timeline there and the process of who's all involved in a project like that, just getting to that level?
Yeah, there's lots of people involved, from university president to the board of trustees. Obviously, internally and on campus, our facility folks. You get architects involved. We, we started, to be honest, not long after I got here, started looking at what our options were, whether it was to, renovate Coleman Coliseum, whether it was to build a new arena. And what we first announced was the plan to renovate Coleman. But I also said when we announced that, as it was part of our overall 10-year capital campaign called the Crimson Standard, we went and started going deeper into potentially a remodel and then looking at other options off-site, or not where our current one is, and building a new one. And the more we dug into it, the more we felt like the better option was to build a new arena. We've been aggressively going out in the market from a fundraising standpoint, and started the planning. And we had it at the point where we were told we could bring it to the trustees for stage one approval. There's multiple stages in the process, and so we're continuing to raise money for it. Now, just like anything else right now, inflation is something we're going to have to pay attention to and understand the impact that it could have on the project, which we're doing right now. But we're continuing to move forward, and we're continuing to make sure we can have a arena that would fit our needs and also fit what we can do financially for the long-term financial health of our department. And so it's a lot of people involved. It's multiple steps. It's as much as you want it to be, and sometimes fans think you say, hey, let's go build an arena, let's put a shovel in the ground, we'll be ready to go. I wish it was that simple, but it's something that we're working through those different processes for this facility project, just like any other one.
Whenever your first time looking back that you ever went to a board of trustees to present at any of your stops, what was kind of going through your head with entering that room for the first time, and any advice for someone that goes in their first time, whether it's be ready for any type of question or just being comfortable speaking to the board? What was your process or your feelings, and then what would your advice be?
This is kind of beyond the trustees, but one of the things early on for me, and my wife would point it out to me, which we all need people in our lives. You got something in your teeth, you want somebody to tell you, right? That will tell you things. One of the things I tell our executive team: don't tell me what I want to hear, tell me what I need to know. Okay? That is really important advice. There are times when I'm talking to Coach Saban, I said, Coach, I think we need to think about something this way, right? And it's maybe not necessarily what he wants to hear at the time, but it's my opinion, what I think is good for us, just like he does the same thing for me, right? And you need to have people around you. So one is you need to be prepared. You need to be able to have the people around you that you trust to ask you the questions you think could be coming your way, prepare you for that. Okay. You also, and so back to, I'm really good at changing the subject really quickly. Early on in my career, I would get behind a microphone, and Regina, my wife, would say, man, you're talking too fast. You're getting ramped up, when it's not the time to get ramped up. Sometimes you're making a speech and you want to start making, have some emotion to it, and you're trying to make a point. But she knows most of the time for me, I'm fairly steady Eddie in how I approach things. And she said, you get riled up too quickly. And so you're talking too quickly. So I found that the first few times I presented in front of a board that I was doing that. So I need to take a step back, take a deep breath, going to be all right. Make sure I get the message out clearly and I'm well thought out. And then, and then that part I just mentioned a minute or so ago, you better be prepared for it because, the board has an important job to oversee your university and has a fiduciary responsibility for you as well. And so you need to make sure you're doing the right things there. But taking a deep breath and not talking too fast and being prepared are probably the best things I could tell you right off the bat.
Greg Byrne, Director of Athletics, University of Alabama. Thanks for being on Higher Ed Athletics.
Thanks, Travis. Hopefully it doesn't hurt viewership too much.
I think we'll be okay.
Okay. All right.